Hey, I'm Alex,
And I'm Brandon.
and welcome to Living Electric.
We're both content creators and electric vehicle enthusiasts.
And through this podcast, we hope to share our experience with owning electric vehicles and help you join the electric life.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Living Electric. For today's episode, we're going to be talking about some really cool things like Joe Biden's plan to convert the federal fleet to all electric, GM's carbon neutral plan by 2035, as well as a bunch of other things that electric vehicles are good at and rebuttaling some FUD.
Yeah, so one of my videos that I posted last week was all about Joe Biden's plan for EVs. And this was prior to his whole announcement that the federal government is planning on converting everything to electric. So prior to getting elected, like on Joe Biden's website, like a lot of other politicians kind of lay out their whole plan if they're going to get elected, right? So on EVs specifically, his plan is to install 500,000 new chargers. So not like hitting 500,000, but 500,000 new chargers, which I think Brandon and I looked up. We're sitting at like 40,000 right now. So that's like a 10 times increase, basally. Like it's a lot.
A lot more.
Yeah.
A lot more.
Which would be awesome. And then another part of that plan is reinstating the federal tax credit. So right now, both Tesla and GM are no longer eligible for that tax credit. And not that it's slowed down their sales per se, but also it might turn some people off if they're looking at buying a new EV. If another company has a tax credit, they might go towards that company. So kind of making it fair for all companies again to sell EVs and let them keep working on EVs would be a good thing.
Yeah, I'm curious to know what that federal tax credit will do with competition, especially with like GM coming out with, I think they said 35 all electric vehicles by 2025.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Yeah, a lot of the comments on my video were kind of talking about that, like, well, what is this going to do for competition? Because obviously we want to make it somewhat fair for companies, but I feel like right now the tax credit, it phases out after you hit 200,000 vehicles. So it's almost unfair to the early arrivers or the early adopters of EVs, the people that are already working on them. So like all the new EVs that are now coming on the market 10 years later after we had like some big EVs like the Model S and the Nissan Leaf, like they're not getting the tax credit anymore. So
yeah, it's going to be interesting, especially with these startups too. I wonder if that tax credit, if they'll do anything for like commercial vehicles, like how Lordstown is working with like a bunch of fleet.
That was another point I made in my video too, is like, this is obviously just a plan. We don't really have a lot of details right now. And I mean, with any politics, like plans are great, but until it actually gets put into place, we don't really know what's going to happen. So but it'll be interesting. I know in his plan, he kind of laid out that he definitely wants it to be like American companies first. So hopefully American car companies and cars built in America will get precedent on that EV tax credit.
Absolutely. Yeah, I could definitely see that, especially with those, the startups like Lordstown, Lucid, all these new American manufacturers.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of leads into Joe Biden's press conference where he talks, I believe it's about a week ago now, right? That he did kind of a whole press conference laying everything out.
Yeah, that was about a week ago.
Okay.
At the end of January.
And he basically, like on a basic level, said we've got over 500,000 cars in the federal fleet, and we would like to convert all those to electric by, is it 2030? I think that was the year.
I believe so.
I might have to Google that real quick.
I think I'm gonna have to look at that too.
This is from the White House website. So it says President Biden set ambitious goals that will ensure America and the world can meet the urgent demands of the climate crisis while empowering American workers and businesses to lead a clean energy revolution that achieves a carbon pollution-free power sector by 2035 and puts the United States on an irreversible path to a net zero economy by 2050.
Okay. So we got the decade right.
Yeah. So I'm guessing it's something along there. I swear there was a year attached to it, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah.
But anyway.
So talking about going carbon neutral in 2035, GM recently announced, right around the time Biden announced his plan that they will be going carbon neutral by 2035. They announced that they will be coming out with 35 electrified vehicles by 2025. and they will be replacing pretty much all their light duty vehicles with fully electric vehicles as well. So that's pickup trucks, SUVs, passenger vehicles. I'm assuming cargo vans with their Bright Drop business line.
Yeah.
So it's going to be pretty cool.
Yeah, and kind of back to the federal government thing, there's obviously going to be a huge government contract for a lot of vehicles. I know we talked
Yes.
about the post office is probably the biggest one, where we've got all of these old 1980s vehicles that are, I believe they get like 10 miles per gallon, which is just like, we're just throwing money away at that point, right? So,
Oh, yeah.
and a lot of those post office vehicles don't drive very far. They're very low speed. They're braking all the time, which is where like EVs shine, really. Like, that's where they do the best.
Oh, yeah. All the maintenance savings, fuel savings.
Yeah. And I think that's like a huge thing that I think people might not put in the whole equation. They might be saying like, well, this is going to cost so much money, but like, it'll be really expensive up front to convert all these vehicles, but after that, the cost of like operating and owning all these vehicles is not going to be that high.
No. In fact, we actually did some of the math.
We did.
Yeah, we did. What's really cool is that on the federal website, I think it was the General Assembly website, if I remember, where we found that massive spreadsheet. There's a public spreadsheet where you can find to the exact amount what kind of vehicle the federal fleet is using for which specific department. They also break it down on cost per mile, and currently the cost per mile for the federal fleet is around 97 cents, or roughly $1, which equated to well over, I think, what was it, $3.8 billion? It
was a lot of money.
Year? Yeah.
It's basically $1 per mile, and then you multiply that by all of the vehicles we have and the miles they drive, and it added up to a lot of money, basically.
Yeah, it was a lot. Yeah, and just to compare what it was like if, like our ownership experience with driving an electric vehicle, I think we were sitting, like around 6 cents per mile?
It's about a tenth of the price, basically. So,
yeah.
I mean, you're instantly, at least for operating, obviously that's not putting up upfront costs into the equation, but at least operating expenses would get about a tenth of what they were before, which is awesome. I mean, think about how much money the government is going to save by doing that.
Yeah, it's incredible.
So that kind of leads us into a lot of our kind of major topics for this week, is talking about what EVs are really good at. I think a lot of people kind of start thinking about all the compromises you have to make with an EV, but honestly, it's almost the opposite of that. Like, there are a lot of benefits to driving an EV, and Brandon and I are going to kind of share our experience with that and what our cost savings have been like, what our experiences driving them have been like. Any range issues or lack thereof, I guess, with driving an EV. I guess kind of on the expense side, I know for me, I'm in a really unique position where I had a lot of free charging at work, and that was a major factor in switching to an electric vehicle is the opportunity to charge at work free of cost every day. It's kind of a benefit that we have as employees working for the company I do. And previous to driving the Model 3, I was spending upwards of $200 per month on gas, which were you about in the same boat?
Yeah, I was.
And what were you driving before your Bolt?
I was driving a 2017 Volkswagen Golf.
Okay.
And I was averaging about 38 miles to a gallon.
So still an efficient car, right?
Very.
So
yeah.
And I was driving a Scion FRS, which is still like probably my worst car purchase I've had in my short life of owning cars. But I was in the same boat, paying $200 some a month on gas, which was part of the reason I could switch over to a Model 3, which was like objectively a much more expensive car. But I could afford it because I didn't have to pay for gas. Like, that was a huge draw for me.
I know for, I'm assuming driving a Scion, it was reliable because it was a Toyota product.
Yeah.
So did you ever have to put any maintenance work into it?
I didn't, no, just kind of the typical stuff like oil changes and things like that. Never replaced the tires because I didn't own it. I owned it for about a year, I think.
Oh, okay.
And ended up losing money on it because it was just depreciating. So, obviously wasn't a great purchase for me.
Yeah. I fell into the same boat because I ended my lease early to go electric.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But typical Volkswagen, I did have to put some money into it.
I guess on the on the electricity side, like I don't have to pay a lot for charging, and that was partly because I was getting free charging at work. I'm fortunate enough to have a lot of referral miles from the Tesla referral program, so I basically never have to pay for supercharging again. I think I have over 100,000 miles
Wow.
of free supercharging right now, which is
That's
just absurd,
that's
which I'm very
awesome.
fortunate. I'm definitely in a very unique case here. So I kind of am reluctant to share my cost of charging because it is not accurate for most people. So Brandon, what's your charging like, at least since switching that?
Yeah. So sadly, GM does not have a referral program. I wish I could get free
Though
charging miles.
a lot of companies now are including free charging when you buy a car, right?
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. I know Volkswagen, Lucid, I think Tesla too, right? Or no, did they switch back to a pay per charging?
For all of the new purchases, you have to pay for supercharging unless you get a referral code and can get some free miles from that. But if you buy a
Okay.
used Tesla, some of them do have free unlimited supercharging, which is
Oh
definitely
yeah, that's
definitely
right.
a good thing to look for if you're looking at a used Tesla. Is see if it has free unlimited supercharging, because that can help cut costs as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially, I mean, a free road trip. Who wouldn't want
Yeah, exactly.
that? Yeah, yeah. I know for me the charging expenses weren't too expensive. Unfortunately, I didn't have the opportunity to take part in like workplace charging.
Hmm.
At least where I'm currently employed. My previous employer had 20 chargers in their parking bays, like in
Nice.
their garage, which were free for employer or employees.
That's awesome.
But charging from home, it's only roughly about like $30 a month, which is still, over $150 saving.
Yeah, yeah.
So, which has been really nice,
Hmm.
just to come home and plug in and just, get going with my night.
And it's way more convenient too. I don't think many people factor that into the equation. Like when you go get gas, it's typically like when you're out running errands and stuff, and it's just another thing to do on your list. Whereas like with
Hmm.
an EV, you drive home, you plug in, and you wake up with a full charge in the morning.
Yep. Yeah.
Like, which is
Which is
crazy.
super
Like
convenient.
there are
Yeah.
no gas cars unless you like work for an oil company, maybe that you can like a fill up at work or fill up in your garage. Like
Yeah.
it's pretty crazy.
I know. I think the one thing that like I definitely don't take for granted is being able to plug in, like say for example, like during a snowstorm, instead of like having to run out and get gas during, like a blizzard.
That's a good point.
You could
Yeah.
just
I
plug
didn't
it
even
at
think
home,
about
just go
that.
inside. Yeah, a YouTube comment actually triggered that thought of mine. They were discussing that it might be hard to like plug in during a storm or something like that, and it's like honestly, it's not. Just
Yeah.
yeah, you don't have to worry about driving in the snow, get gas,
Exactly.
go
Yeah.
outside.
I'd never even thought about that because you're like you said you're like in a whiteout right now. Like
Yes,
it's pretty nasty out.
yeah, yeah. I was just thinking I do not want to go out and get gas,
No.
but so that's a nice perk.
Yeah,
Charge at home.
so costs are definitely a big draw, and similar to like the federal government switching over, when you switch to an EV, EVs right now have a higher upfront cost than gas cars, so that's definitely like something to consider. But when you're
Mhm.
buying a car, I think it's important financially, and not only with EVs but any car, honestly, is to look at the total cost of ownership of the car. Like,
Yeah.
what is your maintenance going to be like? What is it going to cost to own the car long term? Because that's typically what most people do. They're owning cars for multiple years. It's not just a short thing. So
Yeah.
factoring that
Yeah.
in and seeing how much you're going to save on gas, how much you're going to save on oil changes, transmission replacements, like any of that stuff.
Yeah.
Like that's something to consider when you buy a car, and it might not be something you normally think about.
Yeah. Alex, I'll tell you an example. We had a Volkswagen that had a Porsche transmission in it.
Okay.
And every year you would have to go in for an $1,000 maintenance on just the transmission.
Wow. Because it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
Porsche or
Yeah, it was a DSG transmission. So
okay.
it was like their dual clutch
Okay.
automatic. I don't know too much of the detail, but all I know is that you would have to go in once a year and spend $1,000 just for maintenance.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, I'll take my single speed automatics any day.
Yeah. Jeez.
Don't want to worry about that. Yeah.
There's typically less than like a dozen moving parts on an EV, which is crazy when you think about how complicated cars are typically. I mean, you got the you got the motor, you have the transmission, you have like everything involved. So I'm not a car guy, so I don't know like all this stuff. That's like part of the reason I switched over to EVs, because I don't have time to learn about all that.
Yeah. I grew up around it. So.
Yeah. So you probably know better than me.
Yeah, I just was almost forced into it as a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good thing it's lived on.
So when I was looking at EVs, I think a lot of people thought like, oh, well, they're just going to be like a golf cart. Like people have probably driven like electric golf carts before, and they're zippy, but they're not like speed demons, and they're not like
no, they're
not like crazy fun to drive. But when you get into a real EV, like not that there aren't non-real EVs, but like an actual car that's like built to be electric, it is insane like how high performing they are. Even like,
oh yeah,
even between our cars, like the Bolt is like a hatchback, which is typically not like a high performance car, but
no,
I mean, you could probably share more on that.
Yeah. Like the best thing about my car, especially in sport mode, is that like it feels like it's doing 0 to 60 pretty quick. I know it's doing 0 to 60 in like 6 seconds. But like 0 to 35, like almost nobody catches up with me. That's
awesome.
It's great to squeal the tires, scare the people in the parking lot.
Which is crazy because you probably like have people at stoplights look over and like, oh, that thing's like slow.
Yeah.
You can just beat them off the line.
Yeah, it's actually funny. I did like a faux practice autocross course over the summer, and the back of the car, the Bolt, is front wheel drive.
Yeah.
And I took a turn pretty quick, and the back lifted up, and my car now has the name Piddles because it looked like it was like a dog.
That's
Piddles
awesome.
the Bolt. But how do you feel about your Tesla speed?
Oh my gosh, it's insane. Like obviously I was coming from a Scion FRS, which is like a 2-door sports car, which is like obviously I'm pretty sure the Scion it's a Toyota FT86 is the like same model. Which is not typically like a very high acceleration car, but it's still very like nimble and can take tight turns. Like it's a sports car.
Yeah.
And switching to the Model 3 was insane because it felt like it melded a luxury car and a sports car together to build like a crazy like racing luxury car. Like it's insane.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously it's like a much more expensive car, so it is like a lot nicer and in a lot of different ways, but the acceleration is what got me and what I probably like most about driving an electric car. Not only for like gunning it when the light turns green, but also the safety aspect of it. Like I feel much safer in a car that can do what I want it to whenever I press the pedal. I'm not waiting for it to accelerate. Like if I'm on the highway and I need to get around somebody, or I can see that somebody's like driving recklessly and is about to swerve into me, like I can get out of the way really quickly.
Yeah. Well, I know that saved a lot of people online. Like there's a bunch of videos that show the instant torque has like saved them from being rear-ended. And I know for me, whenever I get back into like a gas-powered vehicle, I keep saying like, this is so slow. Why are the gears shifting?
Yeah. It's funny when I get into my girlfriend's car and I gotta drive. It's like waiting for the gear to change every time. She drives like an old SUV though, so it's like obviously going to be slower than a Tesla. But yeah,
I know. Not to mention like a manual transmission, like waiting to go through the gears.
Yeah,
it's more engaging, and I think it's fun when you have to drive a manual. But
definitely,
it's trying to get that RPM up.
I have still not learned how to drive a manual car. I still need to learn. Yeah, I've never needed to. I've only owned automatic cars. So, and like my family's never owned manual cars. So yeah.
Well, I don't think I would say I would offer our manual car, but if I can't fit in it, there's no way you're gonna fit in it. Most of the time I'm like driving with my head like to the side.
That's funny.
So Alex, I was going to ask you, have you either ridden or driven like a P100D or some of like the performance Model S or
I
Model
drove
X?
A friend of mine here in Columbus has a P85D, and it's an older model. I believe it's a 2013. So like one of the first like performance Model S's that came out.
Oh,
and it was funny. I met up with him at a supercharger, and it's in like a Kroger parking lot. So there's a perfect drag strip at the back of the Kroger parking lot that we used. So, and that has the the ludicrous mode or insane mode or something like that, I think, which is crazy on the Model S because it's not like the Model 3 where you just like punch it. It has actual launch control. So
Yeah.
you press on you probably have done it before, but you press on the gas or you put it into the launch mode. You press on the gas and then you press on you press on the brake, then you press on the accelerator, and then it'll like get ready to launch basically. And then as soon as you let off the brake, it just goes.
Yeah.
Because the motor's already like spun up when you've got the gas on, which is crazy. It just like turns the current on and then guns it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So his car only does 0 to 60 in 3.1 or 3 seconds ish, which is only yeah. Well, this new like Model S Plaid is doing sub 2 seconds, which is just even hard to comprehend.
I can't even imagine. Like I haven't driven like the new performance Model S, but like I've driven the P100D with Ludacris.
Yeah.
And doing 0 to 60 in like 2.3 seconds. My dad actually lost consciousness when he was riding me with like the one time.
Holy crap.
Yeah. Yeah, he got like tunnel vision. So I can't even imagine what it's like to do 0 to 60 in under 2 seconds.
Yeah, it's absurd.
I feel like it's going to hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously Teslas are kind of on the high end spectrum of performance, but even like I drove a Nissan Leaf about a year and a half ago, and it's still like 0 to 60 in sub 6 seconds. Like it's still going to beat like most new cars if you're not buying like a performance car. Like, it's insane.
Yeah, that's how I feel about my Bolt. Like even if I'm going like 30 and I punch on the accelerator, I still get thrown back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fun torque figure really fast. I just want to say this. When Chevy had the Spark EV, at the time it actually had more torque figures than some Ferraris.
Really?
It had over 400 pound-feet of torque.
Jeez. That's insane.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was like the one milestone that car lived up for.
That's funny.
Or lived up to. I love how fast EVs. I don't think I could ever go back to.
I know. That's the thing is like I get in a gas car. Obviously, I drive more EVs than gas cars now. Like if I'm doing a test drive or anything like that. But I'd be interested to see like how quick some of the newer cars out are, because I know like cars are still quick, but to get that like higher performance, you almost have to buy like a performance car.
That's one thing I really want to get behind the wheel of a Porsche Taycan, because it has the 2-speed gearbox instead of like the typical 1-speed. So that extra gear, even though it shifts super quickly, is supposed to help with performance figures.
I gotcha.
So I really, really would love to test drive one.
Yeah.
See what that's like.
So in terms of range, do you think you've ever felt like you don't have like enough range to get where you're going, or B, don't feel like you're going to run out of range quickly? Like did you ever get down like really low and be like, oh, I'm cutting it close, I might run out of range?
Yeah. So I'll tell you, I did when I first got my Bolt. We went on a trip up to Detroit, and we did not plan it right. It was cold. We had the heat blasting the entire trip. We were driving like 75 miles per hour. And we were like noobs to driving electric cars. So on the way back to the Electrify America charger, the charge dropped below 10 miles. Oof. And we had 15 miles to get to the charger. And it was screaming at us, flashing, bright orange lights, stuff like that. But we made it with 5 miles left on a charge. So after that experience, I think it like reassured us that these cars are smart enough to warn us that they're if they get that low. But ever since then, I've never been concerned.
That's good.
What about you?
So the lowest I think I've been, I spend most of my driving around Columbus, honestly. And the lowest I've been, we were like right next to a charger, but we wanted to drive like closer to home so we could charge and then go home instead of like going out of our way to charge. And I think I tweeted about it, but I got down to like I arrived at the charger with like 1% left. I typically leave my car on percent. I feel like I might be in the minority there, but
I wish I could do that. I genuinely wish I could do that.
Because honestly, like similar to you, when I first got my car, I left it in range mode, like with the miles showing up. And I was very like, I would always pay attention to like how many miles I had left, how many miles it is the next charger, all this stuff. But honestly, like I leave it on percent now, and obviously I don't have a home charger, so it's a little bit different. So I almost kind of treat it like a gas car now, whereas like if I get below 25%, it's like, okay, I probably need to go plug in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And similar on a road trip too is all kind of plan it so that I'm arriving to a supercharger with around 25% left, because that's when your charge is the fastest as well.
Yeah.
And that's actually speeds up a lot of your road trips, as if you're arriving with a lower state of charge. But definitely, similar to you, that's something I thought about a lot when I first got my car is, am I going to be able to make it? Like, am I going to run out? All that kind of stuff. But in my car as well, it will yell at you when you need to plug in. If you're on a road trip, it'll say you need to stay below 75 or 70 miles per hour to reach your destination. I don't think it turns off heat or anything like that. But those are all kind of things you learn after you've been driving, is like what affects efficiency the most, like what do you need to do to make it to your destination. But honestly, like I've never had to make like compromises that have made me like uncomfortable driving or like cold while I'm driving just to reach my destination.
I refuse to give up my creature comforts. So I will always have either the AC or the heat on.
I'm the same way.
Yeah, I have to. I know now, now that I've been driving, an electric car for like a year and a half, I actually go out of my ways to test the vehicle just to see how low I can get it.
Yeah.
Purposely.
Yeah. And I've kind of done that. Like that's part of the reason I drove to that next charger, is to see like, well, what's it gonna do? Like, like I almost wanted it to get down like below 1 and see what happens.
Yeah.
Because I was close enough to a charger, and I'm not sure how smart the Bolt is. If it'll say like it's estimating like you'll have X amount of miles left when you arrive at the charger, or it doesn't do that.
No, no, it does not. With the Bolt, you kind of have to figure that out, that out yourself. But if you have like Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, you can look at the My Chevy app on your infotainment screen, and it does like a good job of showing you like how much range you'll have left when you get to your destination. But from my experience, it doesn't update in real time. It updates like every 10 or 15 minutes. Gotcha. So I wish it was to that point.
Yeah, mine is. I hope they do that in the updated Bolts. I'd assume they'd kind of revamp the software and make it a little bit better.
I genuinely hope so too. Some type of routing software would be great, even if it just showed you, your estimated range.
Yeah, that's a huge part of why I went with the Teslas, because they have a lot of that built in. It is like incredibly accurate with how much range you'll have or what percent your battery will be at when you arrive somewhere. So I literally plug in my destination, or I plug in my charger, and it'll say you'll arrive with 36%. And I'm like, okay. And then I get there and I've got 37%. Like, like it's crazy how good it is. And it also takes kind of your like driving style into account too. I think the biggest thing with EVs is efficiency is affected by a lot of different things. It's similar in gas cars, but you probably don't notice it as much because you're like, oh, I've got a quarter tank, I probably need to fill up now. Whereas like with an EV, I think people are like almost have this preconceived idea like, oh, I'm gonna run out, like I gotta be careful, and it's not necessarily the case. And you're gonna lose efficiency in a gas car similar to what you would in an EV. It might be a little bit more just because of how like tuned the EVs are for the different environments they're in.
I was about to say, like, you brought up a good point. Like, when you're driving a gas car, you don't notice how, like, exterior temperature might impact your efficiency. Because it doesn't really provide that data to you like an EV does. That's a good point too. Yeah. Like the Model 3 or like the Mustang Mach-E, like those, and the Bolt, I guess like almost every EV, the projected range changes based on your environment. Yeah. And your driving style, especially the Mach-E, like they don't even show you a number that isn't based on your driving style. Really? Anytime you get in the vehicle, it updates accordingly to how you just drove the car, what the temperature is. Wow. And that's like accurate. People have tested that already.
That's awesome. Yeah, whereas that might be like almost what prompts the range anxiety, is this just like slew of data that you get about the car, and people are like, oh, I've lost this amount of range driving from here to here, and the temperature was this. And it's like, if you're in a gas car, would you even notice, or would you just like fill up when you got to your destination? Like,
honestly, I feel like so many people who drive gas cars are so focused on the MPG that they don't think of the the other efficiency numbers or anything like that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But I agree. I think a lot of people just worry about the next fill up.
Yeah.
with gas.
And I think part of that is like at least in the cars I've driven where it's got the estimated range number, it'll say like I'll fill up and it'll be like 450 miles. I'm like, awesome. Like I don't have to worry about that for a while. Whereas like an EV,
Yeah.
you fill
Yeah.
up and it's like 250 or 300 miles. It's like, oh, well, I might not have enough. But I don't think I've ever like, I felt that way at the beginning, but now it's like not a huge deal. And I think it's less of a deal, especially if you got home charging. We talk
Yeah.
about this with a lot of potential owners. Like, where are you driving your car typically? Do you hop in your car and go take a 300-mile road trip every day? Or do you hop in your car and drive to work?
Yeah. Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
and for most people,
Not
that's the
everybody.
case. Like, I think we were looking at some stats on this, and like the average commute is about 20-ish miles. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Less on average, it's less than 30 miles round trip.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you hop in your car, you drive to work. You might have charging at work or not. If you don't, that's probably not a huge deal. You drive home and you plug in when you get home, either in your driveway or your garage, and
Yep.
you wake up in the morning with 250 or 300 miles again. It's not like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think with gas, you're like you kind of have to shift your thinking a little bit. It's like you wake up every day with a full charge. It's not like you wake up every day with a half tank and got to stop for gas somewhere.
Exactly. Yeah. Which takes you out of your commute if you think of it.
Yeah.
You know, to have to stop somewhere and get gas. And Alex, I was going to ask you, have you ever been concerned if there's like not enough chargers out there? Like if you are going on a road trip, like what are some of your experiences with that?
For me, it's been a little tougher because I don't have home charging. I think I talked about that a little bit in the last episode, but the hardest part for me is probably finding chargers that are available, honestly. There's never usually being in Columbus, we've got a ton of chargers. I've actually been very like impressed with the amount of chargers that are out there. It's just whether or not they're full, honestly.
Oh yeah.
Like we've almost run out of like spaces to charge because there's so many EVs out there nowadays. So like for example, I went down to like downtown in the little town we live in Columbus here. And they've got a charger right off Main Street if you want to go to shops and stuff like that, which is
nice.
awesome. It's owned by like the local city building. Free charging for residents. It's awesome. So I drove over there and a Volvo XC90 or something like that. It's a plug-in hybrid was plugged in there.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh gosh, like, which like I didn't necessarily need to charge, but I was not having home charging. I'm always looking for chargers because I might as well get a charge if I'm going to be parked somewhere. So I backed in my car so that it was close to the charger. Left my business card on the car that was sitting there and said, "Hey, can you please plug me in once you're done?" They're like, "Sure thing." Like they texted me afterwards, said like, "Yeah, no problem."
That's awesome.
Plugged in my car, which was awesome. Like I definitely love the EV community for being people like that. Generally, we're generally kind of looking out for each other since we're such a small percentage of drivers.
Yeah. Yeah.
But honestly, at least driving around town, I never really have worried about like finding charging. And kind of back to your point, like most of your charging is done at home anyway. So like I don't think people always throw that into the equation as like, well, I've got to stop after work at a charger. It's like not really.
Yeah. Yeah, you almost have to take that like gas perspective out of your head when, buying an electric vehicle. You don't necessarily have to stop somewhere after work.
Yeah.
You can just go home.
Yeah.
Well, the most majority of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's been interesting for a lot of at least in our Tesla group, is anytime I chat with people and I say, "Oh, I was over at this supercharger," they're like, "I haven't been to a supercharger in 6 months." And I'm like, wow. Yeah. Like, especially even with the pandemic, since people aren't traveling as much, they just charge at home. Like,
yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. I know that's the case for me. Unless I'm purposely going to a fast charger. The last time I was at one was September.
Wow. And I think that kind of to a bigger point there is people always get worried about us not having enough chargers like to support a large fleet of electric vehicles. But if you think about it, anywhere there's electricity, that is a potential charging location.
Yep. Yeah.
Right. So,
yeah.
And think about where we've got electricity. It's everywhere.
Yep. Yeah. I know. For example, like if you need to go camping, there's the the plugs for RVs at campgrounds.
You're right,
that,
yeah.
most EVs can plug into, and the nice point is you could even sleep in your EV if you wanted to.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brandon and I were
Treat it
just
like an RV.
yeah, Brandon and I were just talking before this. We might do a video in the future. I've got somebody that wants me to check out their bed for the back of the Model 3, so I'm gonna try to find either a campground or, if Brandon lets me, just sleep in his driveway and steal his charger. So
I won't charge you for electricity.
But yeah, that's
That'll be fun to do.
that's another nice benefit, honestly, is I think people often think it like takes forever to charge, and we touched on it a little bit in our last episode, but like Brandon would say, you got to shift your thinking from gas. Like when you go fill up your gas car, you pull into the stall, you put your car, don't plug your car in, you put the nozzle in your car, and you wait there for 5 minutes or maybe 10 minutes if you got a big tank, right?
Yeah.
And then you pay, and then you drive away, which like is fast, but like, is it convenient really? Like,
No.
no.
No, it's not. And actually, a thing that just popped in my head too, safety reasons. When you're pumping gas, you have to be there to either hold the pump or monitor it. You can't just walk away.
You're right. Yeah. And with an EV, like we touched on in the last episode, typically you're charging when your car is already parked anyway. Like you spend probably less than an hour in your car on a daily basis, unless you're doing a road trip, which like is kind of a whole nother discussion. It's a reason we want to do a whole podcast on it, honestly.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like that's almost a whole different type of charging than day-to-day charging. And your car's typically parked when you do most of your charging, either in your garage, at work, if you're shopping, like any of that kind of stuff.
And like Alex touched base on a future episode of a podcast with road tripping, if you are concerned right now, like there's plenty of chargers out there, and the network and infrastructure is growing every single day.
Yeah. I know on the Tesla network, you can make it coast to coast completely on Tesla chargers. I believe Electrify America now has a route east to west and west to east.
2 routes. I think they just announced the second one. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Which would be cool to do. That's kind of a dream of mine.
Oh,
is
same.
to do it coast to coast.
Yeah. I'd have to take a lot of time off work to do that.
Right. I know.
But yeah.
I know. It's that will happen one day. I'm going to make sure of it.
Definitely.
Save the PTO.
That's right. So another concern I hear from potential EV owners, or just like EV skeptics, I guess, more than anything, is like, what's our power grid going to look like if we've got like 50% electric vehicles? Because that's like a huge increase in power, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you think about, you come home and like you turn on all the lights and stuff. You turn on your AC when you get home, or your heat, I guess now, when you get home from work. And we've got this huge uptick in power, and that puts a lot of strain on our grid right now. Like, what's that going to look like when everybody's also plugging in these giant EVs that are pulling like 50 or 100 amps of power? Like, that's a lot, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So there is definitely a concern there. It's not necessarily something we can't adapt to. When power companies are looking at like load and stuff like that, they forecast all that stuff. It's not like this is coming out of nowhere. EVs are growing, but it's not like we're going to switch to 50% EVs overnight and suddenly have like millions of gigawatts of extra power needed like immediately. So that's definitely something power companies are looking at and continuing to beef up the grid to support. I mean, our power consumption has continued to go up in the past few decades as we become a more like digital society more than anything. We've got computers running now. We've got all kinds of other stuff. And I mean, it is a concern, but it's something we've got a lot of smart people working on and working to
which is comforting.
Yeah. And working to adapt to. Another thing is too, our power consumption right now, we've got a lot of consumption during the day, but then at night, like, consumption drops down a lot because people don't have lights on. They're not like running anything. Factories aren't running. Like, a lot of that stuff isn't running 24/7. It's typically overnight, like that midnight to 5 a.m. where like not as much power is being consumed. And if anything, EVs will help kind of level that power consumption out, right? Because most of the EVs are charging overnights in a garage or a driveway, and can help kind of balance out that power consumption. So I think there's benefits and downsides to to lots of EVs on the grid, but I think it's something we're adapting to and going to be able to support for sure.
Well, yeah, Alex, I actually never even like really thought of it like that with kind of balancing out the grid.
Yeah.
Like I know that there are some utilities that like offer cheaper rates for charging during specific hours.
That's another thing we could touch on.
So now, like, I mean, like I've known about that for a few years, that it depends on your state and your location, utility, but I never thought of it as a way to balance the grid.
Well, that's the main reason rates are typically cheaper overnight is consumption isn't as high. So they're like, yes, if you want to wait till like 9 or 10 p.m. to start charging your car, then we will give you a lower rate because we need that extra power during that kind of like 5 to 9 p.m. like but while people are at home doing things before bed and everything gets shut off. So that's why they kind of give you an advantage to charging overnight. Do you guys get a reduced rate for overnight charging?
No. I wish we did.
Yeah, I looked at it. I don't think we have that because it's like there's a higher energy rate at like peak hours, and I don't think we have that as bad in Ohio. But like California especially, I know has like peak rates because power consumption is so high between like 5 and 9 p.m. when everybody's doing everything
true.
before bed, but then like the rates go down overnight. So that's another advantage to probably check with your local power company. It's probably on most people's bills as well. You can see like what your rates are, and you can do some calculations too to see like how much energy your car is going to take overnights to charge, and then see what you're paying in gas and kind of figure out the difference. I'm pretty sure there's some good calculators out there for that sort of thing.
And, that's just another thing EVs are good at.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, saving you money.
Yeah, so in planning for this episode, we originally were going to do kind of like rebuttals to all of the FUD you hear about EVs, which FUD, for those that don't know, is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Like, you typically, like in articles, you'll see all these like bad things about EVs, and we didn't want to give extra attention to that. Like, we really wanted to focus on the positive side of owning electric vehicles, because as owners ourselves, we know probably more than anybody what the advantages are. So that's kind of the route we went with this one. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it and found some value in it.
And I hope that you guys had some FUD with this podcast.
Some FUD.
Good. Some fun. Like I said, that was 3 weeks in the making.
Some top tier. If you're here for EV stuff, you're staying for the top tier jokes from Brandon.
Right? Who knew this was a comedy podcast?
Oh my gosh.
Like I say every episode, I'll try harder.
Alrighty, so that'll do it for this one. As always, reach out to us on social media if you have questions or things you want us to cover in a future episode. We really do appreciate all the feedback from you guys on YouTube and Twitter, Instagram. Love hearing from listeners, and
it's been awesome. Yeah, it's been great to hear from you guys. So keep it coming.
Definitely,
we love it.
So that's all for this one. We will see you guys all in the next episode.
Okay. See you guys.